Hi and welcome to the Fishhead Creations podcast, where I pull out one of my interesting knitting projects every time and talk you through the details. My name is Anna, and first of all, thank you for all the great comments and feedback on my first ever episode last week. This time I'm trying out another setting on my camera, so it might be a bit more merging of several clips and well, it should be a higher quality, and we'll just see if it gets too annoying if I merge so many short clips, because this higher quality setting means I can only record in 5-minute episodes, so I'll have to merge several of those for a full episode of the podcast. Also, please forgive me for not wearing any knitwear because it's just incredibly hot here. We're having the heat wave of the decade, ever. I think it's the hottest summer ever recorded in this area, or in the whole of Europe. You probably have heard of every podcaster complaining about the heat, so forgive me if I do the same, but it's 30 degrees Celsius outside and it's hot. It's incredibly hot and I hate it. So yeah, I already start to melt because I had to close the windows because my neighbors are just obnoxiously loud and crazy and doing stuff just below my window. And well, if I'm distracted from that side, it's because my neighbors are doing weird stuff. If I'm distracted to that side, it's because my cats are being cute and melting in the heat. So, well, enough talk about the weather. I'm not even British and I can talk about the weather forever. What I actually want to talk about today is keeping your hands warm. What are these actually? In Germany we call them half gloves, I think. But are they mitts? Are they gloves? What are they? I have no idea, but we're going to talk about them, and they keep my hands warm. So, let me just grab my show notes. My main problem with mittens in winter is that I tend to run very hot, especially my hands tend to run very hot. And if I keep mittens on, I just overheat immediately, and also I need the dexterity of my hands. I don't feel comfortable if my fingers are contained in one mitten and I can't use them individually. Also I just don't want them completely covered by wool because it's too warm for me, and I tend to take off mittens after a few minutes of wearing them, and then I get cold again and have to put my mittens back on, and it's just too much hassle for too little comfort. So what I decided to do last winter was knit these. Especially when I go to the stable with my horse, I have to do quite a lot of work that just needs full dexterity of the fingers, because I have to open knots and stuff things into other things and just handle my horse. So I decided to go with the individual fingers, but only half fingers, so that I wouldn't get cold between the fingers. So here, that's what I don't like about mitts, so the traditional fingerless gloves. The cold tends to creep in between the fingers. So I decided to go with just half fingers, to keep my fingers a little warmer, but to retain full dexterity and be able to just grab and open and handle whatever I needed to. For these, I used my trusty Finkhof Merino again, just one of my favorite yarns, and I had quite a few leftovers. And then I went through several mitten patterns on Ravelry just to figure out the stitch count for a roughly sport to DK weight yarn. As we have established last time, I don't do gauge, because my gauge changes so much depending on just my moods and what I want things to be. I just decided to go with what seems to be the most common needle size and stitch count for a sport to DK weight mitten, and just experiment from there. So in the end, I think I based the stitch count of these and the increases for the thumb gusset, the increase rates, on Scandia's Selbu mittens, so just her most basic first pattern, and then just went from there. To decide on a pattern, I took out my 150 Scandinavian knitting designs book, or however it's called, one of Mary Jane Mucklestone's books, where she has collected Scandinavian stranded knitting patterns into one book and just provides a lot of charts and combination methods, varieties. And that's where those horses came from. Because I knew I wanted these gloves mainly for the stable, I decided that going with some horse inspired or horse feature on them would be quite fitting. So in the end these ended up to be 42 stitches on the bottom, then thumb gusset where I put 11 stitches on hold afterwards and cast on 12 more, so up here these had 53 stitches around. And then the fingers have 13, 15, 16, 15, 27, but decreased down to 18, I think. So what else did I do? Yeah, I just knit a nice long cuff. I just kept trying them on as I went. They fit quite tightly. Let me show you. So we have a quite tight fit on these, and it's quite a struggle to get them on and off. But this fit means I can move completely without them getting in the way. They always stay close to my hand and keep me warm while I do whatever work I need to do. So yeah, I knitted them from the bottom up as you do. Just a little bit of garterage before I started the color work. It's just the Mary Jane Mucklestone chart and a basic chart for the palm thrown together. Classic checkerboard thumb increases and a side seam on both sides. And then when I came to here, I broke off my contrast color. First knitted the pinky finger and ended with the same garterage that the bottom had, and then knit around for 3 more rows on this side before I did the individual fingers, and then went back and picked up for the thumb. I picked up quite a few stitches because I wanted a lot of room in the thumb, and then decreased down to a tight fitting thumb at the top before I did the garterage. And as you can see, I hope, or I'll include a close-up video in the beginning, these have felted quite a bit already because I wear them a lot in the winter, and I wear them a lot when I really work at the stable and have to handle the horses and the hay and everything. So from sweat and water and rainwater, the palm has already felted quite a bit, but it has felted while I was wearing it, so it still fits very well. And a few bits of hay are stuck to the wool and I can't get them out really. But those are work gloves, so I don't really care. But because they are work gloves, I wanted another pair for myself for just daily use. And this is when these happened. I'm sorry. I have to keep a timer to keep track of the 5-minute increments my camera records in, but that means I can't silence it completely. So these I just finished recently. These are from Letlopi by Istex, the most common Icelandic yarn, and there's the same basic construction method. Garterage, a little bit of cuff, color work, hand and palm, thumb increase, just a simple pattern, individual fingers on top, finished with a garterage, same for the thumb. So just basic, same principle of construction, pretty much the same stitch count, but for this one, with the yarn I got from a yarn store in Hamburg when I went there recently. I also got an old interweave Christmas gift knitting issue, and I took 2 charts from that one. First the one on the bottom, and this one only is a 10 stitch repeat around, so I started with 40 stitches and then increased 2 to get to the 42 the other gloves had in the beginning after the cuff. And then this is also just a Faroese traditional chart I took from the Interweave magazine and threw it on my basic stitch count I already had established. This was my first time using Letlopi yarn, and I must say I'm not too impressed. This yarn is usually quite highly regarded and just recommended a lot, but as you can see it's extremely fuzzy, and this is due to the long staple length of Icelandic sheep's wool, which means this is also only a single ply because of the long staple length. This already quite sturdy when you only single ply it, and that made it incredibly splitty when knitting with it. I knitted at a rather tight gauge, I'd say. It's usually knitted at about 18 to 20 stitches per 10 centimeters, and I'm pretty sure this is tighter. We can measure. Yeah, this is at about 25 stitches per 10 centimeters. And so the yarn didn't really like this tight gauge. It was extremely splitty and it felt like fighting the yarn all the time. Well, when I get used to it, it went a little easier, but really it's not the most enjoyable thing I've ever knit. But I think they will keep me very warm in the winter, and they also fit very, very tightly. So you can see it's really a struggle to get in here, which is exactly what I wanted. And these fingers are even a little bit longer, so they will keep me really warm whenever I'm outside waiting for the bus or just going for a walk in winter. So I'm really happy to have these. I'm not really bothered by the fluffy, rather woolly and pretty much itchy yarn. So this lead loopy is usually used for outerwear, like coats, and so it doesn't really matter that much that it is rather itchy, but it is. But on the other hand, I'm not too sensitive. I wear neckwear from non-superwash, non-merino wool all the time, so I'm absolutely fine with that. And yeah, it just wasn't a joy to knit. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to measure as we are on the to mention as we are on the topic of mittens is how I block them, because I don't own any of those fancy mitten blockers, but I do own size small sock blockers. And this top, as you can see, is quite symmetrical, and actually it gets wider at the point where a mitten needs it, that is at the thumb. So I block my handwear on the tops of these sock blockers all the time, and it usually turns out quite well. It gives me a bit of wriggle room at the top, and it helps the thumb gusset widen where I need it. So I'm quite happy using these. And these were a gift by an incredibly generous Ravelry friend. So thank you so much, Joanne, if you ever watch this. They are put to good use. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you again for watching and listening. You can, as always, find me as Caledoniana on Instagram and as Obsty on Ravelry, and I'd love to hear from you. Bye!